So thank you very much for being with us. It's a real pleasure to introduce our first guest. Bill Cope is a professor in the Department of Educational Policy Studies at the University of Illinois. He is the principal investigator in a series of major projects funded by the Institute of Educational Sciences in the American Department of Education, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the National Science Foundation, researching and developing educational technologies. He has co-authored or co-edited a number of books, the most recent one being, actually there are two, it's a series with 2 volumes. They are Grammar of Multimodal Meaning. The first one was Making Sense, Reference, Agency, and Structure in a Grammar of Multimodal Meaning. And the brand new one, Adding Sense, Context and Interest in a Grammar of Multimodal Meaning. It was released this very year in 2020. His talk title is Teaching Shakespeare in a New Way, How Online Learning Can Be Better Than Face-to-Face, Then Transform Face-to-Face. Please, Professor Bill Cope.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction. So this is my, my PowerPoint here, and there are a couple of ways in which my Australian sense of humour is coming through. This is not a great time for senses of humour. I'm talking about the most old-fashioned thing you can do in first language speaking. So what you know, it's the opposite of what you folks need to do, in the sense that, you know, academically successful kids, when they were learning, doing English language arts as a first subject, classically did Shakespeare. And I'm going to take you into a Shakespeare class. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you into a Shakespeare class with my kind of sense of irony and humour. And I'm going to say something very provocative. This is my second thing, which I want you to take with a kind of grain of salt and a little bit tongue-in-cheek, the way I want to speak, is I want to say how online learning can be better than face-to-face. Online learning is undoubtedly very different from face-to-face, and I want to say to you some of the ways in which it can be different in ways which are better than face-to-face, and then how it will transform face-to-face, how we can actually make face-to-face better if we have these tools. Now, let me just, a scary thing that I read in the paper this morning is the head of the chief scientist at the World Health Organization said today that this crisis could even last 4 to 5 years. You know, I mean, if this virus mutates, it could get worse as it mutates. You know, we know that the flu and colds don't go away. They come back every year. So, you know, this crisis that we're in, which has forced us all to go online, we have to be prepared for the fact that we might have to be online an awful lot, and we don't know for how long. Hopefully not 4 to 5 years solely, but, you know, let's just see. So what I'd like to do is take you into a space which is kind of unrealistic in that it's, you know, first language speakers doing Shakespeare. And the other thing I want to say in kind of full disclosure, and to be honest with you, I'm going to take you into a class which is in our experimental platform called Scholar. And in that experimental platform, we're doing things which are imagining the future, which may not be practical and possible right away. You know, my job, I think, is to imagine the future. I'm an education professor. You know, I'm not going to produce stuff which is immediately, you know, it is immediately usable, but nevertheless, I'm not trying to do things which are realistic. I'm trying to do things which are imaginative and in some senses unrealistic. What I'm going to do is take you into this environment called Scholar and show you a little bit about show you these kids doing a Shakespeare class. I'm going to give you a quick outline of my talk where I'm going to talk about 3 things. I'm going to talk about the space between text and speech, which I want to call classroom discourse. I want to give you an example of multimodal writing, so writing in the world of the internet and the web. And then my third example is going to be about how do you measure writing? How do you assess it? and I want to talk about big data, learning analytics and artificial intelligence, and show you these things working in this particular Shakespeare class. So my first example, so I want to talk very practically, and also, by the way, at the end of this talk, I will put this PowerPoint into the file upload in the chat area, so you can all access it as well. So this is what we normally do in classroom discourse. This is face-to-face teaching. We say hands up, and the teacher initiates, and the teacher might ask, what's the furthest planet in the solar system from the sun? And the students all put up their hands, and really only one person can answer. Because what they're trying to do is second guess the right answer, and the right answer is, let's say, Pluto. And the teacher evaluates that's correct. So the classical pattern, and this was defined by Courtney Kasdan, a famous Harvard professor with whom we worked on in the New London group, is initiate, respond, evaluate. That's how teachers talk to kids in a classroom. Initiate, respond, evaluate. Now, what's wrong with this? Well, in fact, a lot of things are deeply wrong with it. And my argument about how online environments can be better takes this, in this first point, as a counterpoint. Only one person can respond. You can't have every kid in the class saying the same thing over and over again. And my second point is that it's always the wrong person. It's the person who already knows, the person who's most confident, the person who's perhaps arrogant. And look, I know as an Australian, I can think of the Australian swear word which describes that person. And I think you could probably think of a Brazilian one as well, who that person is. It's oral, which means it's ephemeral and it's forgettable. It's second guessing the right answer. It's pretty boring to be sitting there listening to somebody else answer the question, because if there are 30 kids in the classroom, 29 are only listening. Right? It's read-only knowledge, except if you're the answerer, so you're sitting there listening, it's pretty passive. It has to be, at this time, confined by these four walls and the timetable. The teacher begins the conversation, and assessment happens somewhere else. At the end of the term, there's going to be a test item about the planets in the solar system. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you into Scholar now, and it's a web-based environment, so the truth is anybody with web access can use it, so we've tried to make it that simple. And I'm now going to jump from here. Oh, by the way, this is my little pun, Shakespeare, spelt the wrong way. It's about peer learning in the Shakespeare space. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint, and I'm going to start sharing my, my web browser, and I'm going to take you into the actual class, right, and show you a classroom discussion going on. So this is the login, create an account, web-based, anyone can do that. Please go and do it anytime you like. This is, by the way, around the corner from my house. I live on the edge of town in the countryside, but believe it or not, from here you can also hear the looters in the shops down the road. So anyhow, when I go and log in, and I've opened a few tabs so you can see things, and I don't have to go looking for them. I see the world this way. So what you see is something which looks a bit like Facebook, a bit like Twitter, a bit like the LinkedIn feed. You know, we're now familiar with this in social media. So we're going to do our class in this space. And what I do is I belong to communities. So we don't have the idea of a class, because a community might be a bit less than a class. It might be several classes working together. And I don't have friends and followers, I have peers. So we want social media logic, but we don't want the way it's nuanced. You know, friends are a terrible idea because you don't want to associate just with friends in a classroom. Followers are even worse because it's not a popularity context. And what happens is I have a continuous stream here, an infinite scroll of what's happening among my peers and in my communities. I'm going to go into this one here, which is this classroom where they're doing Shakespeare, okay? So this is just filtered down only to this class. And this, by the way, is a real class of real kids. And the teacher is one of my master's students in my program. Wonderful teacher. This is a researcher that I've been working with. And we don't have teachers, we have admins, because we might have the kids adminning at some point. You know, the classic idea in social media is admin and member, which is the Facebook kind of idea. Okay, and here's an infinite scroll of all the stuff that happened in this particular class. Now I'm going to go down into one post that the teacher made. So what she did is she made this post here about Shakespeare and connotation, imagery and symbol. Now, by the way, this is a grade 8 class, right? So you just kind of know the level of it. So it's the last year of middle school before the kids go to high school in the American context. And she's got them looking for this, and she says, comment below, share one quote from A Comedy of Errors that you plan to use in your work. How does it, and the work is something they're going to write later on, how does the choice of sentence structure, specific words of in this passage? And then what happens is all the kids start talking about it, and they start giving answers. And see here, they little @ signs, they start talking to each other as well. I'll scroll down and you can see, here's the classroom discussion that occurred. So this is classroom discourse. And I'm going to explain in a second my analysis of how it's profoundly different to putting up your hand in an oral classroom. Okay, next thing. The teacher asked the students now each to contribute something, right? So they actually made a post, and by the way, making a post into the class is this simple. Let me give you a little example here. If I want to make a post into the classroom, I just put in something here, right? And I type in a title and I can upload a YouTube video, link to a YouTube video, I can put all sorts of media in. And when I do that, it goes to the activity stream of all the kids in the classroom and they can start talking about it. So in this particular case, what happened was this kid, they were doing this theme tracking. They did it with little stickies. She took a photograph on her phone. She put it up there. And then the kids started responding to something that she contributed to the class herself, almost as if she was the teacher. She's actually contributing content to the class, right? Now, by the way, this is a sophisticated example at Shakespeare. In fact, these kids, what they're doing, this is a poor school, by the way. It's not in a rich area, is pretty amazing for grade 8 even. But in an early literacy context, you might have just simply put a YouTube video in here and said, what's this about? Or, you might have put, and have the kids talk, this can be used with young kids, grade 4 and above, and it needn't be a sophisticated exercise like this. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint now and finish off my part 1 of my talk. I'm just watching my phone all the time, check that I'm staying on time, as I know I'll be in trouble with Gisvaldo if I take too long. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint now, so I'll stop sharing my webpage and I will go back and I'll share my PowerPoint, and we will draw a few quick conclusions about this. No, it's not that, sorry. Cancel. I need to go and I need to select this one here, and I need to go share, and hopefully you can all see that again. So this is the classroom discussion, and let me draw some quick conclusions about that. Oh, by the way, this is the class. It looks like a fancy, affluent school. It's actually not. And all they've done is they'd simply ripped down the walls, and you see it's just a tin shed, in fact, the class. And there are a few little rooms where kids can work together. They're in this big open plan place. It's not a conventional classroom. They'd simply ripped down all the walls in a very, very ordinary, not very affluent school. Now, on the left was everything that I said that was wrong with the hands up classroom. This is everything that's now different about this classroom where they're discussing Shakespeare in this way. Everyone has to answer. It's not just the most popular. Actually, if someone's got out, they turn off the room. I can do it. Just mute everybody. So one of the other admins, that would be great. As a matter of fact, I'm not able to mute that one. Okay. Anyhow, instead of one person responding, everybody responds. That's a revolutionary change. And there are lower barriers to response. When you go to press the little comment button, you've thought about it a bit, and you've seen a few other answers. And the ones who are less confident gain confidence, right? But one crucial thing in terms of literacy is that this is not speaking. I mean, speaking is rambling, it's all over the place. Spontaneous speech is anxious making. This is something where it's actually got punctuation in it. These are sentences. You've thought a minute before you actually press the button which says comment. Now, it's all documented. Everything we're thinking, we can go back to it. Oh, somebody said that. Well, we can go back if we want to remember what they said, and we can see what they said. But the other important point is productive diversity. When there's only one person can answer, they've got to guess the one right answer. But here, you can give different answers. And by the way, you know the Pluto answer? Well, in fact, Pluto may not be a planet in the new definition of planets, and there may be other things that are. So nothing in life is straightforward as the single answer. It's engaging. Sitting and listening is pretty damn boring, but when you've got a big activity stream floating past, it's just as engaging as social media, WhatsApp, all the things that we're used to. But also it's read-write knowledge. Everyone is just as much, and I don't mean literally read-write, I mean the metaphorically read-write, read in the sense of actively doing, write as in actively doing something. So you've got to, as much as you are reading what's coming through and watching what's coming through, you're contributing as well. Ubiquitous learning. Now, you can do this in a class. It's great to do in a class. So while the kids are doing their work, they can talk about stuff, they can write in their answers, there's a record of them. You can do it in the timetable, in the classroom, that's fine. But also you can just as easily do it overnight. And not in the classroom and not in the same time and not in the same space. This is what we call ubiquitous learning. The other thing is everyone can initiate. It's not just the teacher that's initiating. So when the kid put in their own little example, they were actually initiating a dialogue there. And the last point, which is in fact jumping, we're going to see this in my third major point in this talk, is about learning analytics. We can measure everything that every learner's done, and we can include this as part of the assessment. So let me just say that's the end of that little point. So what I want to do now is I want to move on to, and I think I'm going pretty well time-wise, I'm watching my clock, is that I'm going to talk about multimodal social writing. Now this is the old school, okay? And these are kids actually doing a brochure. Have you ever seen a brochure that looks like that? Oh my goodness. The handwriting gives it away. The coloured in things give it away. This is not real. And it's also, it feels, look, honestly, it kind of feels second rate. This is a good one. The teachers put it online because they think the student did well. But doing stuff on paper in the world of the web, when you could be using web tools to make the brochure, is kind of, it's second rate. But the other thing about it is that it's linear. Do your work, get the feedback. So what happens is you finish the thing, you hand it in, and the teacher gives you a B+ for it. The feedback positions students as knowledge consumers. The artifacts don't look real. It's content-focused learning, and feedback as somebody. There are a number of features of this kind of environment, and I want to talk about how those habits and those practices on the left change quite fundamentally in these new environments. So what I'm going to do is jump back to the web page now and take you to one kid's piece of writing. So this is the work that they finally did. So I'm going to go stop share, and I'm going to go back to screen share and take you back to one kid's piece of work in this environment. So in fact, it is this one here. So I'm going to go share and here. Now, I'm taking you now, Community was as a piece of software that does classroom discussion. What you have to imagine is Creator is kind of like Google Docs. It's kind of like Microsoft Word. It's kids doing writing. But what's different about this is that it's a two-sided screen. They're doing writing on the left, and here's my editor here on the left. But on the right, there's a whole lot of pedagogical stuff that's going to be going on, which I'm going to show you in a second. But the first thing about this editor, this is a multimodal editor, and they're writing about Shakespeare. You can see they've put in images and diagrams, and they could have put in videos as well. So you can put in external media, you can upload a video, you can upload audio if you want to, let's say you wanted to speak out a few paragraphs of Shakespeare, you can upload audio. And in fact, in this space, you can put mathematical equations. So this is a multimodal editor. So this is our point about multimodality. And these are the new kinds of knowledge artifacts of the 21st century, which look very different from that handwritten tourist brochure. Okay, so the next thing about this is while you're doing your work, you see review criteria on the right, which is what's the structure of this piece of work? How was theme analyzed? How was language analyzed? And what happens is that when you can then get 2 or 3 other people's piece of work to review, and what you're going to do is you're going to put a little slider in like that, and you're going to look at the rating levels, you're going to write a comment, give it a score, and you're going to give the other person feedback. And in fact, this, I'm going to go to the next slide here. This is in fact the feedback that the person got. Your essay is good overall, and then the person wrote back, and then there was no comment. Now, in fact, this was anonymous because it was anonymous peer review, but I can see the names because I'm the teacher. It was just reviewer 1, reviewer 2. And there's a lot of dialogue going on, and a lot of feedback. That's one person's review. This is another person's review. Look at that amount of feedback, but we're enlisting the kids to assess each other's work against the same criteria that the teacher would use. Also, there are annotations, see here, although you might want to add more before this to make yourself sound less repetitive. Images, if you add, if I mouse over these, it'll take me to a comment, and these are comments that other people have made, and if I want to add a comment, I just highlight this and I add a comment. These are annotated. So there's a lot of interchange going on, and an awful lot of feedback. So I'm going to jump out of that now, back to my PowerPoint, and draw some little conclusions about what you folks have been seeing there. So let me stop sharing my PowerPoint, sharing the web, and I'll go back and share my PowerPoint, which is back here. And I am now going to talk about what we're seeing there. Okay, that's what we were looking at. And this is a kind of cycle where there's a lot of, we call this recursive feedback. So classic test is, hand in your work, 3 sentences of short comments by the teacher, B+, end of story, linear process. Whereas here what we've got is a kind of recursive process between the two sides of the screen. You write using the rubric, you give peer feedback using the same rubric, you give feedback on the feedback, then you revise the work you're doing, use the rubric, you write a self-review. So you're going backwards and forwards. It's very, very social. And in another lifetime, this would have been called cheating. What we're doing is we're calling it collaborative intelligence. And we have a record of how, when you come to write the self-review, we have a record of, okay, I found this review very helpful. I didn't really agree with this and I didn't do it. And you're acknowledging the way the other people who've given you feedback have helped you. And this is the architecture. This is the change in the architecture that we see. Instead of the old school, which is like this, where the teacher's at the front of the room and all the kids are listening and there isn't much interaction, what the teacher has done by building the rubric, the peer review rubric, they've given a very productive way for the students to work together. Now, the teacher is incredibly important because they built the rubric, which were the assessment criteria that the students apply to each other and apply to themselves. But what they've done is they've structured a relationship of interaction. Now, what you can see here is, oh my goodness, the role of the teacher has changed in a really, really, really quite fundamental way. Now, this is what's changed. Remember the old stuff, the bad stuff on the left that I said that the old classroom did? But what we've done is we have recursive feedback, which is not just feedback, but feedback on feedback. It's prospective and constructive. It's not, oh my goodness, in retrospect, that's only a B+ and become a better person later on. It's actually saying, you can improve what you do in these ways, right? Prospective and constructive, instead of retrospective and judgmental. Learners and knowledge producers, they're actually creating knowledge themselves. The multimodal knowledge artifacts look real because they're actually a web page. But also it involves metacognition as disciplinary thinking. They're thinking about, okay, how does one describe the language in Shakespeare in an effective kind of way? Feedback is actually crowdsourced, so there are multiple sources of feedback from the teacher, from the peers, from your own self-review and so on, and the feedback is formative and for learning. Now, let me show you now, I'm going to go back for the last point now, the third point about measuring writing, how you measure writing. I'm going to go back to the screen here. And let me also say one thing here, is that, by the way, this is the final work, which is essentially a web page. You can output it as a PDF, but it's actually, you know, looks like a web page. It is a web page. It's web writing. And the interesting thing is, this is this particular kid's work. These are all her published works. So the Comedy of Errors one is the latest work that she's done, and this is a portfolio of all her publications. So we have a nice kind of web page where this is her profile page and all the communities she's been in and the peers she's had, this is kind of becomes her web page with her work. Now, I'm jumping out to my third point, which is, okay, how do we measure writing? Well, it's not just the teacher reading the thing and putting a few comments and thinking, oh, that's a B+. What we're doing is we're data mining all this activity. And what we're doing is we are looking through all the things that you did in the classroom discussion about Shakespeare, in the different versions of the work you did, all the peer reviews you got. And in fact, we can measure many more things than this, but in this particular class, this was what was being measured. And what we do, every kid has one of these things, which is a thing called an Astor plot. And what they can do is they can look, and this is my teacher view of the whole thing. So what they can do is they can look at here and they can see how they're being measured. And what the teacher says, look, we want you to get an average teacher peer review score of something, and they can bring that little mouse over up and they can see exactly how their score has been calculated. And let me tell you a magical thing. This was just a week or two's work on Shakespeare, the Comedy of Errors, just a Comedy of Errors activity, that in that week, there were 1,172 pieces of actionable feedback, which is one comment, one annotation, one review, one comment on a post you've made in the community. And in fact, there were nearly 150,000 data points on which the whole class judgment was made. And if I go into the class as a teacher, I can see a pile of data here where this student was doing quite well, that's her there, and I can see exactly how this data was made up. All these different components. Now, we have three macro components, which is focus, the amount of work that you've put in, help, which is a collaboration measure, how much have you collaborated effectively with your peers, and knowledge, which is what have you learned. And in fact, it's very easy for the teacher to set this up. There's a little wizard here where they work out, do you want to weight those three major sectors in the same way? Knowledge metrics, Cetrics, you can give them different values. So when you start out on a unit of work, you just go and fill these little forms out, which is quite easy. And that generates the objective for the learner is when you color, you start at 0 at the beginning of a unit of work, but when you reach 100 is the circumference of the circle, and you can see your petals. This thing's called an Astor plot, which is a type of daisy. The width of the petal is the weighting, and the length of the petal is the amount of work you've got to do to get there. So this is big data. It's artificial intelligence. It's a whole lot of stuff. It's achieving stuff which a kid could never achieve. Sorry, that's which a normal teacher could never achieve. So that's. I'll just draw some conclusions now because I realized I've reached the end of my time as well, but this is good timing because I'm coming to the end. So what I'm going to do now is just go back to the PowerPoint to draw this all together. Oh, and by the way, before I do that, let me say that we have a learning module on the Comedy of Errors, which is where this whole activity gets scripted out. And this is where the teacher plans all the stuff she's going to do, which she's going to deliver these videos. She's going to have some background on Shakespeare. These are all chunks of content which get delivered, multimodal chunks of content, which get delivered into the students' activity streams. So back to my slides now, and I will conclude. So I will stop sharing that, and I will start sharing my my PowerPoint in order to conclude. This is the last point now. So I've just shown you that at work, and this is the model of traditional assessment. Okay, so look, what I'm going to ask you is, what are we doing there? And in fact, I've got a very simple answer. We are just measuring long-term memory. That's all. And you know, now that I've got a phone and where I can look everything up, and now that the web exists, long-term memory isn't so important anymore. And I don't have enough in my long-term memory to operate effectively in life. I use all these other tools which are extensions of my memory all the time. So this is a kind of absurd exercise at one level to be doing this. So what we're doing is in the old school, you know, it's fearful damn thing at the end of the course where it's a very limited sample, a couple of hours. We're expecting to know what you've learned from a couple of hours of a test, measures long-term memory, recall of facts. It's fear-inspiring. It looks at individual intelligence, not collective. Those students can't help each other. It's a one-shot score, which is if you get B+, that's the end of the story. But the last point, which is most important, is that it insists on inequality. We put people across a normal distribution curve like this. And seeing the little key there, we like above average and gifted and genius, and this was where the normal distribution curve was created by this man, Henry Goddard, around intelligence testing. But those at the wrong side of the curve, you're an idiot, an imbecile, and a moron. These are words which are now just pejorative words. But with this, what we're doing is we're saying to every kid, look, you're in the class and you can get to 100 and you just watch yourself get there, you know, little bit by little bit, you keep working at it. And this is an old idea in education called mastery learning. So this is assessment revolutionized. Everything's assessed as you go, not just the test at the end. It's located inside the discipline that you're working in. We can get to higher order thinking, which is critical thinking, creative thinking, design thinking. It's formative assessment. And by the way, I will put this PowerPoint in the chat in a second, so you can all have a look at that. So that's the end. You can visit our website. This is our newlearningonline.com website. We also have New Learning in Scholar, in Twitter, and in Facebook. Come and join any of those. And a little reminder, please go and join this special Brazilian community, this Letramentos community. So thank you very much, folks. I'm going to stop sharing now and hand over to the next person.
Hi, Bill. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Professor Susana Cristina dos Reis. She has an MA in Applied Linguistics at the State University of Campinas, Unicamp, and she holds a PhD in Linguistics at the Federal University of Santa Maria, with an internship at the Iowa State University at the Applied Linguistics and Technology program. She is an associate professor at Universidade Federal de Santa Maria and investigates in the field of applied linguistics, addressing in her research the uses her research interests focus on the development of online courses, digital teaching materials for blended learning and distance education, and the development of apps and serious games for education. Currently, she's the substitute coordinator of the Professional Master's Degree Program in the Network Technologies, PPG-TR in Portuguese, at the Federal University in Santa Maria, and she's the leader of the research group NUPEAD, which is an acronym for Núcleo de Pesquisa, Ensino e Aprendizagem de Línguas à Distância. She has published several articles in Brazilian journals, such as Revista da Linguagem e Ensino, Caleidoscópio, Revista Brasileira de Linguística Aplicada, The Specialist, Revista Novas Tecnologias na Educação, among others, highlighting in her publications the experiences in the field of computer-assisted language learning, CALL. She is an experienced teacher who has taught English to high school students, technical courses, and higher education. She is a former teacher from the Farroupilha Federal Institute, and her talk title today is Digital Technologies in the Language Classroom During the Pandemic Times Experience and Educational Challenges. So, please be my guest.
Thank you, Gisvaldo, for this invitation. And I would like to start saying that apologize that maybe I'm not be able to speak as spontaneous as Bill did, but I tried to follow my PowerPoint here and to try to explain some ideas with you. So thank you, Gisvaldo, for this invitation. And I would like to say that it's my pleasure to be sharing with this live with Professor Cope and with Professor Tessmann. So my purpose for today is to bring up some suggestions and Portuguese class too, and to discuss the educational challenge we have nowadays in order to teach during a pandemic time. So I would like to start some questions in order to us reflect about it, maybe later on. And I would like to ask you, how can we integrate this digital technology in the school context? Considering the real tools we have available in our classroom today. Have you ever thought about that? Take a look at this picture. Are these tools available in your classroom? Considering the technologies you can see here, do you consider your school classroom similar to this? Or maybe does your school look like this one? Or maybe in a more public context of teaching, is your classroom similar to this? These pictures represent different realities we have in school in the Brazilian context, right? So considering that today our classes are being mediated on the internet, in your opinion, have we achieved this state of normalization? I'm not sure if you understand this concept of a state of normalization, but this concept was proposed by Bex in 2003 and 2009. And he said that the stage of normalization is defined as the stage when the technology becomes invisible, embedded in the everyday practice and hence normalize it. Do you think this technology have become invisible and integrated in our everyday teaching practice? Today, this is the way my daughter receive the classes, right? And study along, receiving the material, sometimes not too comfortable, but this is how she is receiving the classes, okay? And well, even though the teaching context has changed, if we look inside these different school contexts, we can notice that we haven't achieved yet the normalization state. Unfortunately, I think we have been experiencing, trying, and applying how to explore technologies. But in fact, these technologies aren't invisible and fully integrated in our teaching practice. But the teaching context has changed, isn't it? According to a recent survey published and developed by the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics in Brazil, it was in the newspaper last week, we can see that 71% of our state population has access to the internet, and 96% did it by using a mobile device. So in addition, this survey shows that only 50% of the population has computer at home. And from this, only 58% has access to the internet. In fact, probably these numbers also represent our school reality in Brazil. So how can we work online or by distance if we consider this reality? Do you have an idea? I'm sure I don't have all the answers, but today I come here to share with you some personal experience related to teaching language and advising some researches developed in public school context. And based on this experience, I would like to bring some ideas and suggestions to share with you. How do we teach language in this scenario? So inside of my research group, we have been developing some researches, and the examples I'm going to explain for you are basically mostly in the researches we develop as along with my members. And most of the teachers that belongs to this group, research group, are teachers that work in public school. They come to study with me in a professional master program. And our main purpose in this group is to give them this opportunity to continue education and to learn how to use the technology, how to elaborate digital teaching material, and how to experience the practice by planning classes in a blended modality or at distance. Also, I have some undergraduate students working with me, and as a consequence, most of the time, my experiments also are I used to apply this in my classes at university. As some of my students, maybe some of them are here, they can say that. Assumptions from a critical and social-cultural perspective. I believe that in order to someone to learn something, it's necessary to promote social interaction. So in the core of my teaching practice in researches, I adopted the concept of language as a social interaction and language as a social practice. So in order to promote this kind of multiliteracy pedagogies that Bill has been talking about, and in order to explore the genre of pedagogy, is necessary to take students in social interactions and learn by doing. So supporting these researches are also the knowledge process that Bills also and Cope and Kalensis has mentioned in previous publication, and that mainly I use a main reference in my studies. Maybe in my classes, I like to test and experience this knowledge process. And I use this to design my classes considering the pedagogical moves, right? As the theory shows, you can start the classes with any of these moves. So it gives us the opportunity to implement different approaches and tools in order to promote learning and to practice the something very interesting I found in this theory is that the authors provide in their articles some ideas on how to promote these moves in the classroom. Most of the time without using technology. But I can see now, listen to Bill, that they are implementing these moves probably inside of the schooler, right, Bill? Maybe later you can answer me these questions. So what I realized is that we can explore these moves, experiencing the known and the new, how to conceptualize by naming and theorizing, deconstructing the genre and teaching the students to be critical readers and exploring the grammatical aspects found in text, but without being near a computer or any electronic devices. So for me, that seems that the focus of this theory is how to approach the language and to get the students in the center of the learning process. Based on this, I've been using this theory to advise my researchers, and I try to implement this theory, including the use of technologies. So, in order to do that, I have started with my students and with my advisors, mapping and identifying the school realities. So I believe that the first step to a teacher is to know the school context. So it's really necessary, first of all, to identify, it's necessary to find out how your students access the internet, identify the level of digital literacy and technology fluency. These two pictures here represent a real context of a public school, where my advisee developed an action research. And in this picture, you can see the school lab where she used to teach Portuguese. In this experience, Mrs. Sequin developed digital narratives with her students in Portuguese classes. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about this experience. So, to do this research, we were interested in exploring multimodal text, and at that moment we were interested in applying inside the classroom the genre pedagogy. More specifically, the teaching and learning cycle of the wheel, proposed by Rose and Martin in 2012. In the yearbook, the authors report the experience in Australia. So we decided to study the theory and try to apply it in the Portuguese classes, along with the use of technologies. That moment, we didn't have too much experience with the theory. So we named this project as producing digital narratives in the public context. In the school context, it took probably 2 years for us doing this research. We defined this approach, which we named the appendage. It's approach that guide language teachers on how to produce multimodal narratives in a genre pedagogy perspective, as well as to develop multiliteracies in the school context. As you can observe in the steps we created here, we start letting the student learn about, experience the new with the noun by exploring the genre. Later on, promoting the joint construction and sharing ideas in constructing an example of a genre, along with receiving feedback from the professor, from the teacher between these steps, and working with the rewriting process in order to later on develop a kind of independent production and then present what they have done. So this approach also highlights the importance of sharing online the material and the things they produce inside of the classroom, right? In this experience, we were worried about how to teach them to produce stories, right? And nowadays, we can see in the theory that we can read different stories in the web, and we can tell different kinds of stories. The genre pedagogy, especially the study from Rose and Marty, explain or show some common educational genres that we can produce inside the school context. So here just I bring some of these examples that we can produce using multimedia material, multimedia classroom, creating this multimedia material inside of the classroom. We can create recounts, autobiographical recounts, we can create news stories, we can create multimodal narratives by using the different software in the web, okay? So, how can we do this? To do this, it's necessary to work in a blended modality, right? And when we apply this kind of project at the public school, most of the time it was necessary to work converging the modalities, right? Converging the modalities, the teaching modalities is already a reality in some educational contexts. But it's not too common in public school, right? Because they don't have Wi-Fi connection, they don't have the internet sometimes. So when I think about blending modalities, I also think in connecting material after the presential classes and connecting and mixing things with printed materials and others devices, right? So by integrating these blended modalities, we can innovate our teaching classroom, and also we will do this using some asynchronous activities too. Something very important to say is that in Sekin's experience, she didn't have use a platform, a virtual learning environment. Just she used the Google Drive and some others materials that we created to our students, to the students to connect online, okay? Nowadays, we have a generation of students that collaborate, cooperate, and share. So we need to take this into account and have and use this in our favor, okay? So let us leave our students to be creative. Let them use the technologies and be autonomous. Go behind of doing just the traditional activities, right? To illustrate how relevant is to let our students produce relevant content, I bring other example here that was developed by Marta. She let her students read more informing texts and especially reports from newspapers. And she wants especially to develop with the students this multimodal literacy. She was interested in providing more multimodal literacy practice with the students in order to them interpret, understand graphics, data that usually available in the infographics or text published in newspaper or magazines. In this experience, the teacher let the students define the topic of their infographic. And those are two examples of the production done during the project. This project, Arroio Regalado, is a social problem in discussion in the society, in the city, right? And they had in discussion this in the city of Alegrete here near of Santa Maria, because she works in Alegrete, that is a very small town near our city. And in this experience, teacher Marileia start reading different kind of texts with the students and let them explore different kinds of infographic in order to develop this multimodal literacies. And later on, they start preparing this material. They use the computer, they work in groups, and this is the result of what they have been doing in their classes, right? The second infograph report the topic about pets, and the girls that did this infographic, the reader's attention in relation how to care and the responsibilities with the animals. Okay, so as I said before, it's really important when we use and when we believe in language as a social practice that our students will be read, right? So this is something that happened in this project. They published the results of this infographic into the local journal and newspaper in the city. You can see here their production, and it was published to the other people and the society to read what they have done in the school. Okay. So this is other very interesting project developed by teacher Bittencourt. She is also from Alegrete. I think I had very good teachers from Alegrete working with me. And she is also a Portuguese language teacher. And she decided to verify how to teach Portuguese by using mobile devices. In this situation, we created some challenges that were disseminated by the use of WhatsApp. These pictures here represent the challenges sent by WhatsApp to the students that participate in this experience. It was also an action research applied in the public school context. And in school, and according to the self-determination theory, there are three elements that foster intrinsic motivation, that are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So by using these technologies, we want mainly to promote autonomy, students' autonomy and competence. Okay, so here are some other pictures. And as I said before, in this moment, these students had the opportunity to experience blended modality and also mixed approaches using different technologies as WhatsApp, Edmodo, and printed material too. So these are some pictures taken during the project, okay? When we have this kind of opportunity, students need to feel like they are in the control of their learning. So I'm quoting here Klein from an article from this year, and Klein mentioned that by giving this opportunity to students to feel in the control of their learning, they must be given meaningful choices or engaging tasks that will make them more engaged in learning. So we must shift from telling students what to choose, where to invest their time. And so this is the reason why using technology sometimes become this challenge for us, because it's not easy to the teacher let the students decide what they want to learn, okay? So in my suggestions, what I would like to say is that school needs to create more opportunities to the learner to learn and to promote new practice that get the students engaged. And to do this is necessary to plan activities in order to promote multiliteracy practice, in order to engage our students and in real context of interaction.
Mas põe no ventilador, porque estava quente, eu estava lá, mas...
I think it's our responsibility as a teacher to scaffold our students' learning. And we will have a lot of opportunities by using these different tools and technologies in offering linguistic support in order to our students learn. So when we have this, we become our students, we also need to become our students like junior scientists. School context can be an alternative to promote meaningful learning. This video here, I have this video available later on, explain this girl showing the importance of reading. She prepares this video and send for her teaching, trying to call her colleagues and other students the importance of reading. So this is the topic she decided to investigate and to elaborate a video about, okay? So the school, it's a good place to start provoking our students on develop these skills and the competences that is necessary to this new society, new century, right? And working together with parents and teachers, we can co-design projects that build such skills. I believe that planning and elaborating projects that promote discovering will let us promote learners' autonomy. As also Klein said, to cultivate autonomy, we need to let the students choose what they want to learn. And autonomy, simple, means choice, okay? And this is something that is not too easy to do, right? Okay, sorry, I got lost here. But when you think about autonomy, we also have to remember that also the teachers as well, right? They will need to transition from teaching the students to helping them facilitate their own learning. And this is something we need to work on, okay? It's really important then to make our students work collaboratively, promote cooperation, share knowledge and experience. And here we have again a picture from the project using the mobile, and these students here are preparing the news stories, and they are working together collaboratively in the classroom. So it's their voice and their opinions. And using technologies, it's allowed them to be in the center of the learning process. And this is something that we have now available online, YouTube, and other tools that make us and that facilitate this kind of activities inside of the classroom. Something also Klein said in his article is that in order to facilitate competence, schools need to shift the attention from the specific content students should learn to focus in on helping them build the skills they are motivated to learn. So how can we do that? By promoting meaningful situative practice and multiliteracies, allowing our students to get in online material, content, games, materials available online, as well as let them to communicate and to express themselves orally in the classroom. So how can we do this? Flip your classroom and blend the material you are going to use. Something very important I would like to recommend is, if you cannot create all the material, use and evaluate the digital materials available online. So we have a lot of different kinds of in our classroom. The teacher's responsibilities is just to evaluate this material before letting the students connect to them. Here, for example, we have a lot of very good material available in the BBC sites or in the other sites that give the students the opportunity to use the language. In Brazil right now, we have this suggestions, a book produced by some researchers from Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais, where they recommend a lot of apps and some example of activities that can be integrated inside of the classroom. Other suggestion I'd like to do is let your students play games and learn. So there are some good educational games that can be useful inside of the classroom to make them practice. But we know that some examples of games are not so useful to use, so not too interactive. But there are very interesting materials that integrate different interdisciplinary content, such as global climate change and other things that we can discuss inside of the class. And here are some links and suggestions that I bring for you, right? I don't know if you already know this game. It's to promote digital literacies to students.
Vizinho, eu tô ouvindo a mulher. Não tô ouvindo nada aí, peraí.
And then so you can connect later on. I can share this PowerPoint with you if you would like to access this material. So my final suggestion is that don't do web conferencing every week. It's not a good idea. Zoom fatigue is real right now. We have some reports, recent reports in that they are saying that the students are now turning off or disconnecting their videos and microphones because they are tired of just receiving lectures or transmitting these very traditional classes online. So if you can, do not use this every week. It's not a good idea. Elaborate my more asynchronous activities challenge that I think will be more meaningful for your students. So at university, we need to work with our students in order to provide language teaching information that allow our future teachers to become sense makers, teachers that will be able to explore multiple designs in the classroom. And this is not an easy task because we can notice that still we have some resistance, but I think we don't have more future. The future is now. And so this is something very challenging for our students that are taking a course in language and that are taking a course right now. So we need teachers that are active, functional, participatory, analyst, and criticals. And we need teachers that are able to explore and to promote in the classroom meaningful learning. And teachers that will mediate the learning process by experiencing, conceptualizing, analyzing texts, applying what they learn, producing text and reading what is circulating, what is available on the society, and what is available in perspective. Thank you very much. I hope I have provide you some food for thoughts, and later on we can discuss. Here are some of the reference I use. Later on I can share with you this PowerPoint if you want, okay? And thank you once again for this invitation, and hope we have a lot to discuss later on. Okay, Gisvaldo.
Thank you very much, Susie, for your presentation. Now we are going right to our third lecturer, which is Professor Marta Tessmann. She is graduated in English at the Catholic University of Pelotas. She holds a master's and a PhD in psycholinguistics. Currently, she is a teacher at IFSul at Sapiranga and local academic coordinator of the Professional Masters in the Professional Technology Teaching and Network, PROFEPT in Portuguese, where she teaches the subjects of pedagogical theories and assessment in educational settings. She has an exceptional interest in teaching, learning the English language, and she is a member of ABRALITEC since 2018. So probably you might have attended a workshop or some communication she has given. Her talk is learning in high school integrated with a technical course and experience with EdTech idiomas. Please, Marta.
Hello, everybody. Well, so first of all, I have to is because of these pandemic times, and I'm not really updating it very frequently, apart from some TV programs that I've been watching too. So I will read part of my honor to be here with Professor William Cope from the University of Illinois and Professor Susana here from Rio Grande do Sul. And thank you, Gisvaldo and ABRALITEC, for this opportunity to present a little what I have been doing as an English teacher in integrated high school in this specific pandemic time. My experience now is that some students have requested some classes, which is good because we imagine that maybe they just want some extension of their holidays. And I could offer the tech language course to all my students. My experience, the bad part of it, is that my institution is not taking remote classes, as I told you, because of this uncertainty about the amount of students who have access to the internet. And the other bad part of it is, although some students have asked me to have this course, just a small percentage have done the activities so far. And I'm afraid of this different learning progress among the students afterwards and make the social difference or their learning difference more discrepant. So what am I offering? I am offering the ETEC Idiomas, which is a distance learning language program designed and produced by the Federal Education Science Technology Network, IFS, via CETEC, MEC, and CONIF, our institutions. The course originally is like this, divided in 3 modules, each containing 200 hours. It's the biggest English or the biggest language course I know, because it has in 3 languages, in English, Spanish, and Portuguese for foreign people. The modules last about 20 weeks, 18 weeks they do at distance, and 2 weeks, the first and the last one, they should go to a school to do it. From a perspective of communicative and intercultural approach to language, the skills provided in the Common European Framework of Reference, with the contents distributed in modules levels A1, A2, B1. The classes are available in the virtual learning environment, where the student is invited to embark on exciting adventures divided into episodes with the characters of the English course. So I'm going to try to show you, hopefully I can. Let's see how it works. Can you see it? Yeah. So this is the Moodle, the platform we use in IFSul, our official platform. And this is all my courses and all my groups. And let me just scroll it down. We have the courses here. So this is the layout, and I'm going to show you, probably some of you already know this, but I'm going to show you the 1 episode. I don't know if we are able to listen to it. It's just less than 1 minute. Let's see if it works.
Happy. She received a rejection letter. again? From who? Hello.
Although we are pleased with your application, Channel 93 is not hiring new employees at the moment.
Are you glad? Are you glad now? Steve, are you okay? Yeah. What do you want?
Look, our new Brazilian classmate is coming soon. You should get out of here.
In a minute. Have my number. Call me if you need anything. I think they're gonna like you. Goodbye. I hope so. Bye. Hi, I'm Rosa.
Hi.
Nice to meet you, girls.
So, okay. So coming back, so this is the course that is one of the episodes, okay, the first one, and the idea is to have all this Brazilian grow and Brazilian people having their experience, all the pragmatical things are there too, issues are there too. For example, the last part of it, she was hugging. It could be a bit weird if you're not Brazilian, right? All this touching. Well, the activities, unfortunately, I cannot open them in this computer I am now. The activities are not friendly to all the computers, but they are like this, okay? They have the English instructions here, and if you go here on, it says Portuguese, you change it to Portuguese, so then you can understand it better if it's the case, since it's for beginners, right? So questions, and then you have to mark one of the options. Other kind of activities, this listening one, the sounds of the alphabet, and then you type the letter you hear. This is other activities. So there are many activities in this platform that can be used by the students, and they can manage their time and their knowledge. I believe that most of my students, they already know this basic English things, so they are advised just to jump these activities and to do the activities that they feel that they could learn something more, or maybe they can just revisit things. So how did I do this? Because this platform is made to do this distance course, okay? This was done in, let me remember now, 2017, probably 2016, yeah? So what I'm doing is I'm using this now, exactly now, in this pandemic times. So how am I trying to use it? Well, first of all, I advertised it for my students by internet and email and social medias. And then when I advertised it to them, to all of them, I asked them to tell me, to answer and tell me what level they think they are, so I could put them in the correct So I did the registration there, and then I sent some instructions. And in the instructions, there were including, for example, use a headphone because it's much better for you to listen to the things, try to be in a quiet place, in a good environment, and so on. So problems that we can have with it is that my experience with this methodology in this total distance learning is a great surprise. It's good to say that I have used this before, but in another environment. I was using this as a blended learning stuff. So this was the time, so I used to divide my students in 2 groups in the previous years. And I divided my students in 2 groups, so in 2 different levels. One group would stay in the computers lab doing the tech activities. The other group would go with me to the classroom and would do the more communicative part of it, since I find that it's quite of a problem in this platform because the interaction is not very good, and the communicative approach is not really something that works well. So technical problems also happen here. There are lack of autonomy of some students to manage their pace of study. So it is our aim to develop this, but all of a sudden we started working with this methodology in a distance learning, in a remote learning sort of thing. So they are not used to it yet. So we still have this problems with the students managing their study. And trying to come to a conclusion then, I think now we are in a time where we used to think some years ago that, okay, something has to happen to learning processes, right? So now something is really happening to the learning process, and we can avoid anymore using the internet and using all these instruments that some people even tried not using them in classroom. So now we do have to use them. We have to integrate this virtual world, the school, and the real world. It's a great challenge in learning and in teaching too, because we don't know really how to do it. And I think it never has been so fascinating, but also it could be so frustrating if you don't have the tools, if your students do not have access to internet, if they come from a scenario like I showed you about my students here in the campus nowadays, where they can have even money problems right now, which is interfering in their learning abilities. And that's it. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening to me.
Professor Bill, I'm gonna start. I've chosen 2 questions. I'm gonna ask them together so that we can save some time, seeing it's already 7:04. There are more questions, but I saw that people and even Professor Bill Cope answered them. So I'm gonna share the ones that weren't answered so far. So the first one comes from Inês Albernaz. And she asks, when you provide feedback to the students, do you correct language as well? Or are you more concerned about content, not form? Should we, as Brazilian teachers of English, correct our students in tasks like those? Question is from Pedro Santana, and he mentioned, would you recommend using design techniques, sound editing tools, etc. for that, or rather let them be active to what regards to this? The first one is about correcting students. Are you concerned with form or just the context?
Right, the answer is both. So, and I've got a very kind of narrow, I'll give you the Scholar version of it. So when the students are writing, there are two types of interaction that can go on. One type of action is called review, which is a kind of a global thing about the way the ideas are structured and the general content. That can be content focused too, by the way, you know, about what it is that you're saying. But then we have this other annotation tool where if people can actually give each other feedback, and one of the things is, you know, students correcting each other as well. So both of those things, those macro content questions and the detailed annotation questions, they're all important. Yeah. Now the second one, again, remind me what that one was very quickly, Gisvaldo.
I think it has to do with multimodality, because he asks if I was wondering about overt instruction in the use of different modes.
Yes.
Would you recommend using design techniques, sound editing tools, etc. for that, or rather let them be active to what regards to this? In what regards to this, probably.
So the answer to this one again is both, which is overt instruction is just simply explicitly saying how something works. So in a multimedia environment, you know, you have, you know, hyperlinks and navigation and a whole lot of stuff that you're designing for this kind of essentially non-linear text. And to build an explicit meta language about that is very useful and very important. And also the other side of the coin, if I understand the question correctly, is immersion, just simply doing things, getting used to both those things. So in terms of the learning by design pedagogy, you know, we say that this is part of a repertoire of pedagogical practices. The one that is more experiential and the other one is more conceptual and overt. So the answer is move backwards and forwards between one orientation and another. That's the kind of answer that I would give to that.
Gisvaldo, may I ask you for Professor Bill a question right now?
Sure, be my guest, Susan.
Okay, Professor Bill, I would like to know, how can we design the material inside the Scholar? It's something similar to the Moodle's environment, or do you have any other kind of tools that allow us to create the material inside of it?
You can create it all in Scholar. So one of the things we have is we have a, so Scholar is just web-based. So any browser you can get in and you can do things. And in fact, there's a whole lot of learning by design learning modules, which I'll put the link in for them just now, in fact, which are designed entirely. So the answer is it's web-based. It doesn't involve any software at all, and you can do it all internally inside the Scholar environment. Now it is very, very different from Moodle, and the difference between, you know, essentially the Moodle stuff, and by the way, all learning management systems are essentially the same. Even if you buy expensive ones like Canvas and Blackboard, they're all essentially the same. So really what they do is kind of file upload and download, kind of a hub and spoke model for learning. Whereas what we've done with Scholar is much more like Facebook and Twitter and Google Docs and all those kind of social environments. So it's very, very different from Moodle, which means you've got to learn how to do things. And what I say is, look, it's about as hard as learning how to use Facebook and learning Google Docs. You know, like, so it's like learning because we have 2 or 3 of these tools in there. But you can build out entire learning modules. And I'm going to, as soon as I finish talking now, I'll go looking for a link where you can see a whole lot of learning modules that are built around the learning by design pedagogy.
All right. And do you have any kind of report in terms of how do students feel using this more social media design from this environment? Don't they get lost inside of?
No, they don't get lost. So generally, who are the generally, you know, look, they don't get lost. And you know, in the same way, if we've learned how to navigate Facebook and Twitter and all the other tools that are there, these then are very familiar tools. So we try and leverage familiar ideas, which is, the notion of activity stream, which is where things are happening, which is more or less chronologically oriented. The idea of individual profiles so you can connect with people along the way. So what we try to do is, you know, do things which are basically familiar in this social media world. So yeah, and that's roughly the answer. So look, you know, I get my students into here. Now my students are school teachers, right?
All right.
Who come and do our master's degrees and certificates and whatever. So essentially, and what I say is, look, you're going to be working in this stuff as part of the course, and you're not going to be comfortable for a couple of weeks. And in a couple of weeks, you won't get, you know, it takes a little while. It's like learning any new piece of software. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but you don't need to have any software skills to do it.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to try to use this. I'll try to use in my class with my students, and then I'll let you know.
Also, we have folks there in Brazil who've been here at the University of Illinois. Vania, I know, is there, and I can see Jolene is there. I think I saw earlier Katja Mook, who was here as well. So we have the Lecture Mentors group, the admins in the group are people who are very, very familiar with using Scholar. So you can get local support in terms of how to do things and how to use it. Look, it's a learning curve. And there's a bit of a commitment to learn. You know, it's just web-based software, and it's a matter of getting, you know, just getting used to it. So I'll put a link into some of the Learning by Design stuff now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Susie, I have actually one is a request. Could you share a lesson plan you used based on this learning theory? So you can do it later, and we can let it make it available at ABRALITEC's site. And there is another question. This is an actual question. It's from Lucilene Bender Souza. She says that she faces some problem when she tries to go with writing, since the students' knowledge of the language is very limited. They always go to Google Translate, and it's difficult to convince them to use Google Translate as a tool, but not to translate the whole text. So she wants to know how could we deal with this challenge. And I confess that I go through the same thing with my students.
Well, this is the reason why I used to try to improve the knowledge process, because I understood from, and Bill is here, maybe he can correct me if I'm wrong. I understood that when you are exploring this first process of experiencing, this is the moment you will construct with the students the vocabulary and try to identify their difficulties. And by promoting different kinds of activities, you will let them construct and learn new structures and vocabularies in order to later on be able to produce a text, right? In Portuguese, I think it's easier, but in English, you have to work a lot of different activities, like creating, for example, semantic maps, or making them create a list of things, and then by reading and analyzing different samples of genres, then you can try to improve and let them identify the structure. But it's something really difficult, because they try to use a lot of the dictionary, but as you are the teacher, you identify, and this is the important why you have to promote the kinds of the rewriting activities, right? It's just not promoting one writing activity that you will have the final version of a text. So it demands a lot of times and a lot of feedback from the teachers working together with the students. And especially in producing digital narratives, we use Google Drive, and then we provide the feedback inside of the Google Drive documents and ask the students to try to redo, and they work collaboratively by doing and learning this way. So I recommend them to use the dictionaries. We have some options of dictionaries that are free online. For example, Lingui, or we have Cambridge, or any other examples of dictionary. We also teach them how to use the dictionary, because I think it's a tool that is necessary to learn how to use too. Okay, I don't know if I answer, but these are the true ideas we use to apply it inside of the class.
Okay, I guess I'm satisfied. I don't know. It was asked by Lucilene Bender, if I'm not mistaken. So I hope she was. If she doesn't, maybe she can write here. Let me just, yeah, that's Lucilene Bender. Actually, as we are running out of time, we've already passed like a couple of minutes. Marta, thank you very much, Susie. And Marta, people are asking for ETEC Idiomas, right? How they can have access to the site. And so, as I said before, we are going to make it available on ABRALITEC site. And then Pedro asked, what should we do with the student who doesn't watch classes? A lot of them didn't watch classes yet. It doesn't have the exact context, but probably because sometimes I'm going through this. We are developing a project, and it's all online, and some students don't access the material. So maybe this is his question. What can we do with the students? Because we send emails and we do everything. We have a live every other week, and still some students, they simply don't do anything that it's there. So what's your suggestion on this aspect?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Well, I think it's a change of behavior that we are building now. And it takes time. It's quite new for us to use this distance learning. And we know all the problems we have apart from the distance learning. That's not an easy methodology to use. But apart from that, in specific time we are living, to have the family, the children at home, so the brothers, the parents, everybody sometimes sharing the same computer. So this could be a limit to use it, to watch the videos. The internet is not good enough that we have. So I think we have many reasons why people are struggling in distance learning just now. But I'm also aware that we have to overcome this problem, because yes, I agree with Bill that said in the beginning of his talk that probably we're going to spend some years struggling time. So to change our behaviors, the students have to change their behaviors. And this comes with time, I guess.
Thank you very much, Marta. I would love to spend hours and hours discuss about many aspects, but as we are running out of time, this is my 8-year-old son, and this is something very classical for pandemic times, that we have to work, don't have this. Yeah, don't do this. Okay. But anyway, I would like to thank you, Professor Cole, Professor Reis, Professor Tessmann, so very much for accepting our invitation. I would like all of you who attended up to now. I know that we advanced in time, and I'm very happy with this. So we are gonna leave some context from the three of you, so that people want to learn more, want to make a network to try to find out how we can work better, how we can teach English and Portuguese and other subjects. I would be very glad to help you all and to be helped as well, because it's really overwhelming. So thank you very much, all of you. Have a very nice night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.